Good afternoon. My name is Christine Hull, and I am so happy to be facilitating Unit 1 for We the People National Finals Top 12, Day 3. In a moment, I will have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 10 minutes of judges' questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, and I will be holding up 1 minute and time signs, just so you know what they look like. I suggest you use gallery view rather than speaker view. The students have been spotlighted so that they appear on the top no matter what. And at the conclusion, the judges will give some brief feedback to the teams and we will conclude. Judges, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Connecticut, and congratulations on being here. I'm just going to let you know now so that you can organize your materials that we're doing question 2 today. And we will go ahead and introduce ourselves. Then we would like to meet you as well. My name is Sue Leeson. I'm a senior justice on the Oregon Supreme Court. And to just prove that I'm old, I once taught at Bridgeport School of Law, and I guess it is no more.
I am Margot Lambert. I'm a professor of history at the University of Cincinnati, Blue Ash College, and my specialty is early American, and nice to see you again.
And hi, my name is Tanya McConnell. I was a professor of history at Columbia College in South Carolina for about 20 years, but right now I'm teaching high school students in social studies and social science and history and all that cool stuff. I'm just curious, the only part of Connecticut I have seen is the part alongside Interstate 95. So where are you? What part of Connecticut are you in?
Good afternoon, judges. Oh, we're from Trumbull, Connecticut.
Where is that?
You're going to need to speak up.
We're from Trumbull, Connecticut. It's near the Bridgeport area.
Okay, got you there.
And Christine, I'm really having a hard time with volume. Because anything be done? I really want to hear these folks. Well, I guess we're going to ask you to kind of yell.
Yeah. So,
all right, so
Is there any way you guys can move the computer that they're using for can you move it closer to them? Is that possible?
That might help.
Let's pause, hold on.
My name is Abigail Clark, and I will be studying political science at the College of the Holy Cross.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicoletta Colucci, and I will be studying political science and film at American University.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'll be studying political science at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. For now, we are all seniors at Trumbull High School. Here is our coach, Miss Boland. We thank you for being here today.
Thanks very much. And at the risk of sending you away hoarse, the sound is much better, volume's better, but it's still not wonderful. I don't want to miss a word of what you have to say. Let me read question 2 and we'll get to work. The foundation for good government is the rule of law. John Adams once wrote, "Good government is an empire of laws." How, if at all, is the rule of law embedded in our founding documents? What challenges to the rule of law, if any, have we experienced in our history? And in what ways, if any, has the rule of law been important to the preservation of a free society?
In recent years, many have invoked the concept of the rule of law to denounce protests and other public displays of outrage against systemic injustice. Those protesting in the streets, though, were claiming the rule of law was being violated. The rule of law has always meant much more than the preservation of public order. Former President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "The clearest way to show what the rule of law means to us in everyday life is to recall what has happened when there was no rule of law."
Though hard to define, the rule of law requires that we all be beholden to the same set of laws, not to arbitrary decisions made by individuals acting with unilateral power. As British jurist A.V. Dicey emphasized, the rule of law puts all people on an equal playing field. Without this structure and governing tool of our Constitution that helps to form the empire of laws that John Adams spoke about, Americans will be submitted to a life without prosperity, control, and justice.
Much of the rule of law and the foundation of our government is based off of the 3 distinct sectors of accountability, impartial justice, and fundamental rights. The 3 branches of government under Articles 1, 2, and 3 are designed to check and balance one another and thus hold each branch accountable. James Madison said, "Ambition is made to counteract ambition," and deriving the ideas from French Enlightenment thinker Baron de Montesquieu, the structure of our government was created to hold our leaders accountable and in check.
The Due Process Clause, the Fifth Amendment, with its basis in Chapter 39 of the Magna Carta, laid the groundwork for impartial justice to occur in the United States. The exact definition of due process is somewhat subjective, but can be simplified to this: a fundamental constitutional assurance that all legal proceedings will be fair, and that the government cannot restrict any citizen's fundamental rights without doing so constitutionally. It protects citizens from unlawful or unreasonable legislation by forcing the government to act reasonably.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, wrote Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. These rights would be further protected in the Bill of Rights, and when the government goes against these rights, we the people have our First Amendment rights to speak out and protest.
Despite these protections of the rule of law and the foundation of our government, there have been times when the rule of law has been challenged. This has spanned the course of history, from Lincoln suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War, to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, to the Watergate scandal, to the January 6th insurrection.
However, upholding the rule of law is what makes our nation so different, so resilient, and so free. Even through these challenges, our republic survived. Theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said, "Man's capacity for justice is what makes democracy possible, but man's inclination to injustice is what makes democracy necessary."
Change takes a long time, but it does happen. Take, for example, the LGBTQ community. 20 years ago, a gay couple in Texas could have been arrested for being intimate. Now, individuals are free to marry who they love and can no longer be fired because of their sexuality. The progress that has been made in our lifetime is extraordinary, but work still needs to be done. As Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
It is our job, as we the people, to keep our government accountable and to fight to bend that arc more towards justice as we create a more perfect union. We must hold our elected officials accountable to the rule of law, for as Thomas Paine said, the law is king.
Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Super. Thank you very much. Nice presentation. Margot, would you like to start?
I would. I really loved the note you ended on about talking about Texas and same-sex marriage. My question is this: you talked about holding our elected representatives responsible. How do we hold the 9 philosopher kings and queens now, the Supreme Court, the justices of our U.S. Supreme Court, to task? And they, Obergefell worked, and we have same-sex marriage, and you guys are, it seems to me you're arguing this is a good thing. We are making progress here. Okay, so now what happens that the Supreme Court is going to shift in a different direction due to conservative justices being there, and perhaps what will happen to Roe versus Wade? How do we reconcile this kind of inequity of power among the branches?
The Supreme Court holds its responsibility not to the people and the people's will, but to the Constitution and its words. As we can see with the case of Obergefell versus Hodges, as you mentioned, this was a case that advanced LGBTQ rights. In a controversial case, almost, Cake Shop versus Colorado, there was a 7-2 decision by the Supreme Court that the cake shop in Colorado did not have to make a cake for a same-sex marriage for a couple because of the free exercise clause in the First Amendment. They did not have to because this artistic expression would be going against the religion. So we can see how the Supreme Court needs to rule case by case to decide if it is something the Constitution grants or doesn't grant. And it doesn't matter what the people may feel. It matters what the Constitution actually says.
And I think this whole idea of Supreme Court nominations in the recent years has become politicized. When we look at something like in 2016, when former Senator Leader Mitch McConnell withheld President Barack Obama's nomination of Merrick into the Supreme Court. But then in 2020, just days before the election, allowed former President Trump to allow Amy Coney Barrett to be nominated, and she was then inducted into the Supreme Court. So I think we need to set term limits in order to get more and more justices and allow different presidents of different political parties to nominate judges and other lawyers to the Supreme Court. I think this would end not only the politicization, but also the polarization of our government and kind of end this party versus party.
I definitely agree with both Taylor and Nicoletta. And going back to Taylor's point and your part in your question about inequity and this just changing between the courts, it is ultimately up to the courts and our justices to decide what goes on. Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 78 that it is the court's duty to faithfully uphold our laws. So it ultimately comes down to the Supreme Court, and decisions will change throughout our lifetime. Whether Roe versus Wade is overturned in the new case Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health, there could be a time in the coming years where that is reinstated. So I think we just see where this is constantly changing in our nation.
I think you make some good points. I just want to, on the very last point, just say it's kind of daunting to me that 9 Supreme Court justices have so much power in my legal life. But otherwise, you posed some very interesting points. Thank you.
Tandy?
Is there a conflict between the rule of law and democracy? As you said, as you noted, the Supreme Court, at least, is not a democratic institution. It's not intended to be. Do those two ideals come into conflict?
I definitely agree that the idea of the rule of law and democracy definitely come in contact. If we look back to really the foundation of the rule of law, which much of it comes from the English government and the English rule of law, we can look to the idea of the Magna Carta, and stated in 1215, to no one will we deny or delay the right of justice. And unfortunately, I think that with this idea of rule of law, which comes from our English founders, we haven't really held up to this idea of upholding justice in our democracy. And we see this idea of rights delayed and rights denied as Martin Luther King Jr. stated, a right delayed is a right denied. So I think that this whole idea of a democracy and really trying to uphold the rights of people is still not being upheld today, as there are so many different groups in our country that are constantly being oppressed.
Tom Bingham wrote in his book of the rule of law, in order for the rule of law to be upheld, is that if the rule of law equally protects all people and they're treated equally under the law. And I think holding people accountable, such as when we look to the Black Lives Matter movement, I know Abigail mentioned inclusion and justice. I think making that arrest of the police officers who murdered Breonna Taylor over 2 years ago would really inform this justice for people of color that we've seen, starting in 2012 with the murder of Trayvon Martin, but especially post 2020, post the murder of George Floyd. We need to hold everybody accountable, no matter if they're a police officer, any position of power. In order for justice to be upheld, no matter who you are, you need to be treated equally under that rule of law.
So I'm having trouble with understanding what you mean by justice. It sounds as though you say we're making progress in this society because we're recognizing greater diversity. We're allowing more people to come into that protected circle of the laws. Is that what you mean by justice?
Unfortunately, I don't think that we are still holding up this idea of diversity. I think justice is something we're trying to continue, where we're still trying to give people justice under the law.
But is that what it would be, that we're expanding the pie and letting more people into the essentially the functional aspects of our political system? You obviously support progress with respect to gay rights, or at least you call it progress. Okay. What else would you put in that category of progress towards justice?
I think voting in specific would be a really good example of how our society has advanced towards justice. Originally, before they even had the Constitution, voting was reserved to white men who own property. As we progress as a society, voting has been open to more and more citizens. It opened to Black Americans, it opened to women, it opened to people who live in DC, it opened to people who are 18 years and above. Though we have continually expanded this ability to the right to vote, because how
okay. Until the past couple of years ago, and we now have 24 states significantly restricting voting rights, closing down the number of polls, requiring all kinds of voting, proof of right to vote, making voting much more difficult. What's going on here?
Though there have been voter suppression laws passed, and there has been an insane amount of gerrymandering across the country, there are also voter expansion laws being passed. There's the ability to have early voting, to have mail-in voting, and both of these were used especially during the COVID-19 pandemic for people who it's harder for them to actually access the polls. There are other moves to make voting a national holiday and to make a positive right to vote amendment. All of these moves would make people have a greater ability to vote. As we said, this is a perfect example of having a just society.
And going back to your first question about justice and advancing justice in general, I think one of the most simple ways and then one of the most powerful ways is advancing our education and really ensuring that justice is being understood by everyone. Recently, in our own state of Connecticut, Governor Lamont passed a law saying that high schoolers who go to community college right after high school, their first year of community college will be free. And I think
Your governor had the power to do that?
I'm sorry?
You said the governor passed a law. Your governor had the power to do that? That's cool.
It is cool. And I think
it violates separation of powers, but that's okay.
And our governor is just one of the examples of how our education is being continued on. We see that former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor instituted iCivics, which is a program that advances civic education for students all across the country. 9 million students in 50 states are using iCivics, which includes 14 nonpartisan video games for students to engage in. So I think this whole idea of justice is going to be continued and advanced through our use of education and informing everyone in society, especially our younger generation, on how to advance and ensure justice.
Former President Barack Obama said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or for some other time. And in order to see change, we need to act now. And I think, as Taylor said, with making voting day national holiday, getting more people to the polls, and as Abigail said, with civic education, and like our governor did, getting more people educated in civics would really influence and push for that change that our former president spoke about.
So one quick question: is progress reversible? Can we go backwards? And are we possibly going backwards?
I think, unfortunately, it can go backwards. When we look at something like the Parental Rights and Education Bill in Florida, which has been dubbed the Don't Say Gay Bill by pro-LGBTQ plus people. In our speech, we mentioned Obergefell versus Hodges and how this has been a super influential move for not only LGBTQ plus Americans, but also LGBTQ people across the globe. And I think that something like the Parental Rights and Education Bill is negative and pushing back on those LGBTQ rights. I think passing something like the Equality Act would really strengthen those people. Can I finish my thought really quickly?
Sure.
Just passing the Equality Act would really strengthen the rights and protections, as Tom Bingham said, under the rule of law and for LGBTQ plus peoples.
Thank you very much. Margot, would you like to go?
I would. I want to say nicely done, very well done. I was impressed with you before. You came out even better this time. It sounded like me. Correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned Obergefell and yet Masterpiece Cake Shop, and it seemed your argument with Masterpiece Cake is that his religious rights. It was he needed protection too, right? That was, it's not just, Obergefell who needs rights or LGBTQ, but people who have religious ideas, right? A good part of our country, people believe these things. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying that's, it sounded like that's what you're saying. Did I hear you correctly? Okay, I thought that was very, very impressive. I loved the idea of term limits. Nicoletta, that's wonderful. Nobody else has even come up with anything concrete for my question about the Supreme Court, which I think is a dire issue for our country in all kinds of ways. I loved your history. I loved one thing I wanted to say. There's something about you talked about well, I can't remember, but it's something about the revolution and declaration and something in there. And it just kind of just made me smile that you guys included it in there. And sorry, I've lost it, but just well done. And what a nice end to our day to see you again and to see you come back even stronger. I wish you all the best.
Andy?
Great discussion. You won my lottery of the day for philosophers. So with your mention of Reinhold Niebuhr, yay for that. He is one of the most constipated writers I've ever encountered, but that's probably not where you're going with that, was it? Very well organized. You told us what rule of law meant. You went in and then you explained it with some getting every point in there, I think, quite well. You discussed the documents that mattered. I tend to think that Magna Carta gets more credit than it really deserves in this. I know the book deals with a little bit. In a lot of ways, nobody much thought about Magna Carta until the 1700s, when Blackstone put it in his book and he thought it was a big deal. And well, there's obviously it does play a role, but it also was important for determining things like the right to fish in the River Thames and things like that. So I wish we could give some more thought on that one. But great job. I liked your response on my question about the reversibility of progress, because you're right, things will, there is no guarantee that things will get better. So thank you very much. And you've been a high an end to the day. It's been a great way to end today.
I agree. Thanks for a very lively conversation and for keeping us as engaged as you did. I felt us getting away from a discussion of the rule of law, unfortunately, and into a discussion of broader concepts of justice. And what I got from your definition of rule of law is, yes, it is greater than the public order, but that's certainly an element of it. And there has to be the same set of laws affecting everybody, no arbitrary orders. The reference to accountability, impartial application, and rights, excellent. But it still doesn't get at the question. The bigger question that you're pushing us towards is, let's talk about broader concepts of justice. And I'll be honest, I don't know what that means. Or let me rephrase it. I think I understood what you mean, but I also know a whole lot of people who would say, boy, is that ever wrong, and are behaving in ways in the public sphere that are so insulting and demeaning and derogatory towards this expansion of notions of rights. And I just don't know what we do with that. Let me make a couple of suggestions with respect to Supreme Court tenure. The Constitution gives Article 3 judges lifetime tenure. So short of a constitutional amendment, there's nothing you can do about that, unless you agree with me that Congress could pass a law saying you don't get to sit on any particular court for life, 15-year rotating terms, go to a circuit court or a district court. That'd be one way to go. How do we get Congress back in this game? Congress controls the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction. The court doesn't. And Congress just keeps expanding its jurisdiction rather than retracting it. An aggressive Congress that agreed with you and shared your idealism and your progressivism would be severely curtailing the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction. They get to do that. So I just think there are even more ways for us to think about ways of making some political changes short of constitutional amendments that are really important. You sure got us thinking about it, though. And again, thanks so much for ending our day on a very high note.
Seriously, thank you. Very well done.
Thank you.